To travel is to kind of learn to see things with a different set of eyes. Open-ended journeys for me is definitely the best. The world is not just a singular story, like we perhaps hear from an article or something on TV. It's like a multitude of millions of stories. If you can try to collect as many of those stories, you can get a bigger and broader understanding. Start to believe that anyone can be your friend. Perhaps you don't understand. So giving yourself time to achieving what you want to achieve for the reasons that you have for yourself. I've had an understanding of how short my life actually is. That you're not doing something for someone else. Get as much out of your own life as possible without limiting or harming others.
Today's guest is Jørn Bjørn Augestad. He grew up on Finnøy, a small island outside of Stavanger, and might be better known by his online moniker Vagabjørn. He's a world explorer, couch surfer, author, speaker, and off-the-beaten-path tour guide. During his travels, he has experienced prison time, life-threatening fevers, wonderful authentic cuisine, and the intense flavors of culture at peace and at war. In 2019, at only 29 years old, he became the youngest Norwegian to have visited every country in the world. He's renowned for his captivating travel photos and videos and has mesmerized audiences worldwide with his engaging storytelling. Vagabjørn shares his experiences with a sense of wonder and a passion for discovery and has written the book Go Discover, The World Might Be Different Than You Think, in which he covers the experiences from his first 30 years. In 2020, he gave a talk at TEDx Stavanger, sharing travel stories to promote trust in people's inherent goodness, to inspire more of us to explore. In 2023, he published a sequel book, Project Borderless, that describes the beauty and the unique challenges of visiting unrecognized states. And now, dear friends, my conversation with Jørn Bjørn Augestad. All right, welcome to the pod. You're the youngest person in Norway to have visited every country in the world. Tell me how it all started. What sparked your wanderlust?
Well, it's a longer story, but I grew up on a small island and I stayed there until I was 16 years old. So then at 16, I moved to Austria for an exchange year, went to sports school there. And from that moment, I think that's probably the most defining moment in my life because it set me somewhat off course compared to my brothers who are both engineers and living a different life than mine. So living in Austria, you have to learn another language. Culture is very different. You make friends. You realize that the world is a lot bigger than your small island and home at home.
And you learned German while being in Austria?
Yeah, I had to.
And you speak it fluently now? Or?
Yeah, as good as my English, I would say.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so in school, everything was in German at home because I stayed in a host family. We spoke German. So it was very exhausting at first. You go to bed very early, very tired. But then eventually it just switches and it becomes natural. You start dreaming in German and...
So that sparked the adventure that there's something much bigger. The world is bigger. I need to explore and see more of it.
It definitely sets the course a different way. I thought from that moment that I don't want to just live in Norway and on the small island. I want to study abroad again. I want to work abroad. I want to have an international life somewhat. But it was more career focused somehow. So when I came home at age 17, I had 1 year left of high school. And after finishing that, I chose to study international communication. And that gave me the opportunity to study in the US, in Costa Rica, in South Africa, and then a master's online through a university in the UK. I had my studies abroad, living in different places, using that as a base to travel around. So Costa Rica, you know, there's very short distance to neighboring countries and flights are cheap to other places. So weekends, holidays, everything was used to travel.
Which year are we in now when you're in the US, Costa Rica, South Africa?
Well, I just turned 35 now. So from 16, that must have been something like 2008, 9, 10, around there. Yeah. It was semesters abroad. And having been living abroad as well and traveling, it just sparked the wanderlust, the curiosity that I wasn't ready to just settle in an office. Even if it was abroad, I just wanted to travel and move and see as much as possible.
After that study, in the US, in Costa Rica, and South Africa. Did you embark on a larger journey after that?
When I finished my bachelor's after 3 years at age 21, I decided to sell everything I owned and to go on a journey for however long. Along the way, I'll probably get a job doing working holiday in Australia. I could be away for 2-3 years. And I traveled 1 month through Europe doing an Interrail ticket, crossing from Aberdeen to Istanbul. And on that journey too, I had a lot of experience. I had a lot of lessons I learned. Among others, I had kebab for 40 cents in Istanbul as soon as I arrived. I said, okay, I'll take 2. That's so cheap. And of course, that ended with an upset stomach. But all these experiences that have gone bad had helped me in the future. But then after that 1 month in Europe, I flew down to South Africa, and I met a girl there from Norway who had a ticket home, and she chose to throw away that ticket and join me on my adventure for many months. Yeah. So we traveled from there to India for 2.5 months, and then we went to Southeast Asia for 4.5 months, and it was in Southeast Asia that the money had run out. So I never made it to Australia to make more money. I remember the moment as well. I was in Koh Phangan in Thailand.
Yeah.
Have you been?
Yes.
It's famous for having
a full moon party.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Once a month when the moon is full, they have this beach party on Heartwarming beach. And that was great. And the next morning when I was looking at my bank account, it was, pretty empty. So then I looked for jobs on Finn as well. I saw the title, job position, as a travel expert or travel consultant, something like this. So that was in Trondheim for a company called Kilroy that organized travels. And I flew home. And I had been traveling for maybe 30 hours, planes to Vietnam and to Russia, and then came to Trondheim with the train, the last part. Didn't sleep for 30 hours pretty much, and was so tired and probably white in my face when I came to the interview. And they were laughing, but I had a lot of stories to tell, and that really, they just hired me on the spot pretty much.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. I love that story.
Yeah, and it's a very youthful and fun company to work for as well. They organize mostly around the world trips, volunteering work, surfing schools, studies abroad. So basically, for people who want to have not a straight highway life, but instead doing like a big bit of zigzagging, experiencing things. So they also had high season and low season. So in the low season, which was almost half the year, I could go on unpaid leave and travel. And
great setup.
Yeah, really, because we were selling tours, for example, through suppliers. And if you sell enough, they want you to come and try it out for themselves, because that helps you to sell more. So through that work in the low season, I traveled on the Trans-Siberian Railway. I did the Silk Road, all paid, it's free travels. And I had this girl I met, she was still with me. She joined on these longer trips for up to 4 months, 4.5 months at a time. And eventually those 4.5 months was not enough as well. So that's the time when I quit.
How many years were you with a company before sort of pulling the plug?
Well, I pulled the plug 3 times.
Oh, really?
So it became a thing where I just traveled until my money ran out, and then I called my boss, hey, after 1 year of traveling, that I need a job again. And that was easy, always flying back and getting into work, no problem. I had more stories to tell. It helped me to sell better. But I stayed with them for on and off for 4.5 years probably. And it was also great because they send you on family trips, familiarization. Then you have everything covered. You go through many suppliers, testing out, a road trip with that company, and a skydive with that company, and a helicopter tour with that company. So it's very busy from morning to evening.
Full program.
But great fun, yes.
Yeah. Sounds amazing.
Yeah, it really was. The salary is not great, for the fun jobs that you do, but it is life experience. And I was sitting in a system looking at flights for around the world and making tricks to make the flights cost lower. And I just found some genius opportunities. So as soon as I would find something very cheap or good for a customer, I would just note it down and save it for my own travels.
Yeah. Fantastic way of planning your own trips as well.
I remember one time I had a woman calling me from Iraq, and this was a time when ISIS was moving, and they had come around 30 kilometers from Erbil, where this woman was living and working. She said, I want to get on the first flight home to Norway, and took me just a few seconds looking up the ticket, and I said, that's going to be 1,700 or something like this for a one-way trip, because it was not very popular, route at the time. I thought, okay, that's so cheap. So I ended up booking for myself, but going the other way to Iraq. So that was, it was an adventurous journey, a special time to be there. ISIS, they stayed at those 30 kilometers away by a river. I remember the flight. This was Pegasus Airlines, which is a very low-cost airline. And I fell asleep on the plane and woke up not in Iraq. I woke up in Turkey because they couldn't land for some reason. So the next morning we made another attempt and landed. But I still don't know why they didn't land the first time.
I think it sounds like a wonderful setup working for Kilroy and having all that flexibility, but also the encouragement and sometimes even the payment to go and travel and explore.
I had a lot of young people coming in, and they came straight from high school. They had been working anything from 3 to 6 months, and then they wanted to travel the rest. So I thought, if these people, young, 18, 19, can work for 3 months, staying with their parents and just saving what they make in Norway, and then going on such amazing trips, then I can do it as well. So I kind of have that philosophy still, that you just need to make what you need. And then as soon as you leave, everything's going to be a lot cheaper. So you can, because a lot of people want to save up for many years, think I need that buffer, I need that safety. But if you can let go of that need for safety a little bit and maybe travel with less, you can also learn to live with less. Especially when you go to places like India. I mean, people make $200 to $400 a month, and they eat for that, they sleep with that, and you can do it too.
Absolutely.
So bus ride, I was in India actually 2 days ago. On the way home. I spent 1 day in Delhi. And you can get bus rides for 10 cents going, across the city. And so instead of hopping in a taxi, just do it the local way, and you can live very, very cheap.
You also get more experiences by doing it more the local way.
Absolutely.
More the shoestring budget sort of way.
Yeah. Because if you stay in nice hotels and you do these taxis, you are somewhat sheltered from everything that is going on the ground. So I like to travel and see all the hustle and bustle, all the grinding of people going to work, pulling carts, riding donkeys, whatever. People being busy, working. Especially those cities, it's very full of life. People are always on the way to somewhere.
There's so much life, like around the clock in so many countries, which is quite, I would say, different from Norway.
Yeah.
You can see people going around with their business like 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the night. There's always something happening. A lot of activity. It's just so busy with life.
Here, people don't want to work more than 7.5 hours a day because they don't have to work more than 7.5 hours a day. In India, it's pretty much, I think, on your mind as soon as you wake up. You have to go out there, you have to get into battle and make your living. And that you might need 14 or 15 hours to make your daily salary. So they are, quite up and eager and, busy.
While we're on this sort of theme of, minimalistic living, I mean, very often when you travel, as you are speaking to right now, you realize how few items and how few things you actually need to get by while traveling.
Absolutely.
And when you come home, you sort of bring that mindset home. And I would be curious if you could speak more to how you feel that sort of translates into may translate into other parts of life.
Here in Stavanger, which I call my home, I have an apartment where I rent out a smaller part at the bottom, and then I have a loft where I live myself. Bathroom, I have a tiny kitchenette and a bed, and that's what I need. So when I travel, I am out exploring, doing things. And the place I sleep, that's just where I close my eyes. So I've had nights where I just go and find a park bench even to close my eyes for a few hours, and then I wake up ready for the next day. So it's kind of the same here. I don't want to have a big couch and like a lot of comfort, because the thing is, when you get comfortable, when you sit down in a nice comfortable chair, you know how difficult it is to get up sometimes. So if you keep yourself busy, keep yourself going, that's the way you can explore more and somewhat get more out of life, I think.
I think once you accumulate a lot of things, the things start to own you a little bit rather than you owning them.
Absolutely.
And it starts becoming more about adding more to that pile of things rather than adding experiences, which is, gives you much more back.
For sure. I was very afraid of buying an apartment as well, thinking, okay, then I'll be stuck for the rest of my life.
In terms of mortgage or in terms of?
Yeah, basically that you have to work to pay. But I found out that renting it out was actually a good way to have a little bit on the side as well for your travel budget. So I was lucky when the time I was getting that apartment in 2020 in midst of COVID as well, when I couldn't travel, setting it up, and it has set me up quite well now for travels in the future, making it easier. But it's very minimalistic. It's very simple. It's not a lot of space, and I don't need a lot of space.
Sounds like a good setup.
Yeah.
People watching this are probably at different points in their understanding in terms of vagabonding.
Yeah.
And maybe we could speak a little bit about the difference between a short trip, typical a vacation, and a longer journey, typically involves different things, more than just the duration that separates them. How would you explain the difference between vacationing and vagabonding in your words?
I think the biggest difference is that you have a set amount of time, you have a set amount of what you want to get out of that trip somehow. Whereas when you're out traveling for a very longer time, you don't know what's around the corner. You don't really plan every step. You're open to the unexpected. And for me, that unexpected it's really a core reason for my travels. And the unexpected could be good or bad, but it brings your life up and down somehow. And if you're traveling for a limited time, there's probably some element which is to get rest or can come back with a fresh set of mind, and that can be great too. I've had to do that when I've been working sometimes as well, spending weekends, etc. But when you're going to a big place like India, being limited by time and how much you're able to achieve, that takes away a lot of the adventure of it. So you might meet someone who is just saying, hey, do you want to come to my village in the mountains and we can go horse riding or, hiking, and to be able to say yes, that's...
Jump onto that adventure.
Yeah, so for 1-2 week, travels, you're more limited in that way. So open-ended journeys for me is definitely the best.
One thing is sort of the feeling of being spontaneous and open to what's happening. You have a longer journey, it's more open-ended. But maybe we could talk a little bit about sort of the mentality as well. Maybe some of the mentality can also translate into other parts of life, as we talked about on the minimalistic way of living.
To travel is to kind of learn to see things with a different set of eyes. And the way I try to travel as much as possible is to stay in people's homes, actually. And you meet people and you hear their stories, and it can help you to see things very differently. Because I learned that the world is not just a singular story, like we perhaps hear from an article or something on TV. It's like a multitude of millions of stories. So if you can try to collect as many of those stories, you can get a bigger and broader understanding of a lot of things. Say traveling in Syria, it's a country which has been very devastated by war, for example. And this we all know. This is the number one thing that we think about when we hear that. But through my, 5 trips now, the last since 2017 when I was there first, I've gotten to see a lot more than just that story. There is creativity, there's culture, there is people who have dreams and careers and their relationships and everything. So everywhere really has something to offer.
I think we're touching on something really interesting. You very often stay in people's homes. And I think one of the things that struck me when I've been traveling is how extremely friendly, welcoming and hospitable people are. And they will introduce you to friends, to family, offer you to stay in their home, offer you clothes, food, everything. And even when they have very little to offer, they're still very open to share what little they got.
Yeah.
And I think that's just incredible to experience. Yeah. And I would love for you to, I believe that you have felt the same many times. And I would love for you to maybe share a few stories to color that.
What you said about people who have little sharing, I find somewhat that often the people who have less are sharing the most. And especially if you go to places that are not as much visited, I found there's two types of places somehow. There's some places that have over tourism, and there's the other side of the spectrum where it's under tourism, basically, where hardly no one goes. And if you come there to places like that, perhaps haven't seen a traveler before, and you'll see that you'll be treated as a king. Because they want to show you, they want to learn, they're so curious about you. Places that I've actually felt really, really welcome has been, for example, in Sudan, which was very, very surprising to me. I ended up spending almost a full month in the capital because of connections I made there. And also part because I had to wait for a visa, which never really came through. But I stayed with a English teacher. His name was Mohammed, and he wanted me to come and meet his class, to join in his lecture. And I talked to students, I made friends, and I decided to just help him as a teacher there for almost a month.
Oh, how nice.
Just like I mentioned, just getting to know more people, hearing more stories. What is life like in Sudan? And being a teacher is a great opportunity for that. They just wanted to speak English. They wanted conversations. And how do you make conversations? You can ask them to tell stories. So I was telling stories, sharing about my journeys, which they were very interested in. And I was very interested in hearing about their lives. How is it different in Sudan compared to how we are in Norway, for example?
I think there's so much beauty in that sort of real connection with the people you meet, and being genuinely curious and getting. I mean, there's so many questions on sort of how do they marry, how do they meet, what's the courtship period, how do they think about food and funerals and weddings. I mean, there's so many things to touch on, and a lot of it is just so fascinating. It's just so fascinating, and they're very often, as you say, equally fascinated to hear about you.
Absolutely.
Which is just it's a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, and I think it's very important as well to get to know people who are very different to you. First of all, you, when you travel, you are an ambassador of your own country, your values and everything that you believe in. And when you get to know other people living differently, thinking differently, you can much better understand why people are living and thinking the way they do in the places. In general, I think travel is really a force of peace. And then it's also a chance for self-development, to get to know yourself and to learn how there's always another side to any, conflict or issue. And to become more patient, for sure, and understanding.
Couldn't agree more. You've written the book, Go Discover, The World Might Be Different Than You Think. And you share a lot of your experience from your first 30 years of your life. And I think in the book you also talk about the importance of trust trust between people and how this can sort of radically reshape our view of the world and ourselves. Maybe you could speak a little bit to that.
Trust is something that can go both ways, and actually by trusting, you are taking a step forward and you're inviting another person to take a step forward as well. So I've had moments staying in some people's home where, imagine just me, I'm a man from Norway, 30 years old, big beard, this kind of scruffy backpacker type. Inviting someone like that into your home, like, who is this person? Will he steal my things, etc.? So I think that me, by trusting that I'll be safe in their home, they will also need to do. So I had to, for example, in Syria, I had one moment where I stayed 1 week with a girl called Nora. And this is a girl I just met in a taxi on the way to Damascus, the capital of the country. And because I couldn't find my friend, it turns out that he was actually arrested for 1 week.
Wow.
He was gone. He was not in reach. I didn't know where to go. And she then said that you can come and stay in my home.
Yeah.
I live in a small apartment with my daughter Nastia and my mother Bilbo. So they had a very small apartment indeed. It was a tiny kitchen, a sofa, and a bathroom and a bedroom. So they had one bedroom, the three of them. And they insisted that I was the one who's going to stay in that bedroom. They will stay on the floor in the kitchen/living room. And that was, of course, very hard for me to accept, but I learned that they insisted. They wanted me to do that. And whatever they had, they shared. Nora, she was a dancer, and she was traveling around dancing. She was doing rehearsals. She was quite busy. And she would leave her daughter with Bilbo to take care of her. But sometimes Bilbo also had busy things. She wanted to meet friends or go shopping. And then I was the one who's going to take care of that small 9-year-old girl, Nastia. So I followed Nastia to school. I was doing homework with her, learning letters and words in Arabic, which I was just as interested in learning as well. And just really this, for me to stay with the only child. I know you're a father yourself, and like for you to trust a completely stranger with your child.
The most precious thing you have.
That is a high degree of trust. So when people call me being naive and so for staying in people's homes that I don't know, etc., then I want to remind them that this trust actually goes both ways. And so far, I've never had any single bad experience staying with someone in someone's home. When they let you in that far to their core, their life, I think that's already showing that these people are not someone who want to fool you. It's quite the contrary. When I stay with in people's spaces, you get to take part of their life. You get to join them on their football practice or, whichever events they go to, meet up with friends.
And truly connect. And they can, I would imagine, for you as well, become friends for maybe the rest of your life. Yeah.
Definitely. I have a lot of friends now, all over. And that is both a blessing and a curse. I would love to just see all of them. But with the time I have in my life, that's very difficult to go in the same footsteps of the last 10 years of travel and seeing all of them. But we can luckily stay in touch online.
That's a good thing with the digital age we live in. We can stay in touch more easily with the people we meet. What would you say has been the best or maybe the most surprising thing that you've learned about yourself or the world through traveling?
I can tell you about one journey, for example, where I've really had to look inwards and especially in relationship to others. It was a time when I decided to join a trip driving from Europe down to South Africa. So that was a 7-month road trip. We were 12 sharing a big van sitting in the back of a truck. And we were sleeping in tents together. We were cooking together. We had to share responsibilities and depend on each other. Because on that trip I got sick with malaria 3 times.
3 times?
3 times. And I was accidentally part or in a robbery which ended up violent, where they stabbed me in the hand. And we had traffic accidents. I was innocent in jail. There were so many things happening.
Let's double click on some of those things.
It was intense. I had to depend on other people. I needed help to get out of jail, to get healthy. And
for how long did you have to stay in jail? And in which country?
5 days in Burkina Faso.
In Burkina Faso?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that is one of the poorest countries in Africa. And the conditions were not very great. So we had water and we had some food. It was me and a friend from the US. And whenever we would complain, they would just take away our water and take away our food. And then we had bathroom breaks 3 times per day. And during those bathroom breaks, we had to walk with the others, holding their pants, walking in line one each time going into the bathroom. And it was a terrible bathroom. It's the worst place where people, instead of doing it in the hole, a few people did it on the ground next to the hole.
Next to the, yeah.
Yeah, so that was not great. Luckily, as I mentioned, I had these friends who came looking for us after 5 days. And as soon as they did and explained the situation, we were let out of jail.
What was the charges that they were holding you for?
I still really don't fully know that until this day. It was all in French, and I promised myself when I left that jail, I will learn French, because if I knew it, I could probably explain myself better and I wouldn't be in there. But the reason why they took us to the site was definitely because we were missing our passports. They were at the embassy to apply for visas for Ghana.
Oh, okay. Which was the next country on the route, perhaps?
Yeah, and that was going to take at least 1 week. That's the case with visas in Africa. You just have to wait for a week. And we had copies of our passports, but we didn't have a copy of the visa, so we couldn't prove that we were legally in Burkina Faso. They took us to the station, and in the station they were asking a lot of questions and repeating a lot of questions, looking through our bags, all our stuff, looking through our phones for pictures. Among some of those pictures were pictures of me with guns and having a big beard, like I mentioned. And this was with the Tuaregs further north, and I think they found that quite suspicious, because Burkina Faso is a country that has struggled with terrorism. And there are people from our countries who go there and join groups, etc. So I think they just found it very suspicious. Why are you here? Why do you have these photos? Who are these people? And without proper language to explain yourself.
Because all the questions were in French?
Pretty much, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
They had some limited English understanding. I had some limited French understanding. Our friends who were French and who came and explained, they just had a short experience. They just got us out, and then we wanted to leave. We would just want to get as far away from that place as possible.
Oh, I can imagine.
So we didn't really get an answer to why we were sitting there for 5 days.
Yeah.
But I remember the burger we had afterwards and the beer, Freedom Burger and the Freedom Beer. That was amazing. That's really when you drive yourself really low, when you're really down. That's the best, like anything is an upward journey from there. So
best meal ever.
Just the freedom, and like you can eat what you want and sleep properly and so on.
Quite an life experience to have.
Sure, for me it was an experience. If anything, it was more boring, because you're sitting there, there's nothing you can do, there's nothing you can look at, and it doesn't help to complain.
And what about the stabbing? Could you share a little bit around that?
That was quite an unfortunate event, because I was at that time sick with malaria, actually, in that moment. I was on the way to hospital together with 2 friends.
Which country are we in now?
Cameroon.
Okay, yeah.
We were staying in a church because we did a lot of camping around churches and in mosques and villages and anywhere where they let us stay for free. So as soon as I got really, really sick, I said I need to go to the hospital. And we hopped in a taxi. They were accompanying me. And then suddenly the taxi stopped in a light, a crossing. And there, from the bushes came 12, 13 people. And they had knives. And they stopped the cars. So there was 2 in front of us, and they ran and they opened the doors, and they had the next ones running and taking the stuff. So I saw this happening before they got to us. And I was getting prepared. I held onto my backpack. So as soon as they came and opened the doors and the next one came, they grabbed the bags of my 2 friends who were sitting next to me. But with me, when they tried to grab my bag, I was holding onto it and being pulled over the lap of my friend sitting next to me. So I came outside. I was super weak, but somehow I got a lot of power at that moment. I was full of adrenaline when I realized that I have my passport in my backpack. I had my hard drive, computer, camera, all the memories from 4 months of traveling, like in one place. There was not a cloud service to back up anything. So I thought that if I lose this, the journey is over. So I was fighting back. I was hitting this guy a couple of times while holding the bag on the trunk of the car somehow, like just pushing it down so that he wasn't able to pull it away. And then his friend came from the other side with a knife, which I kid you not was like this long.
Oh, wow.
So he was just pulling this up and hitting it on my hand where I was holding his backpack. So I still have my scar on the hand today. So then instinctively I just let go of the backpack and they ran off into the same high grass where they had come. And I followed.
Oh, you did?
I did. I wasn't thinking at all. I didn't feel the pain of my hand because there was just so much adrenaline. But then I kind of woke up from my senses then, hearing my friends screaming, come back, it's dangerous, like just don't chase them. So then I came back and then suddenly the pain came. It was like pulsating blood. And I had to go to the hospital. So the taxi driver, he took us the last part for free to the hospital. But when I came to the hospital, they said, they asked my passport, they asked for money. And without this, they couldn't really help me. I stopped, I was just holding the bleeding and needed to ask for a phone and ask him to call this church, which I remember the name of. And there, some more friends could come out with cash to pay for the hospital bill. So they sew up the wound, they treated my malaria, and all my stuff was gone.
Wow. And how did that affect the trip? Did you sort of return after that, or how did you... What came next?
Luckily, I was with other people, so they had cards that I could ask parents, for example, to send over some money that I could withdraw cash from their card. And my passport, I actually have 2 passports. I was very lucky. So in the car, I had locked away my second passport. That made it possible for me to continue the journey all the way. Another 3 months to South Africa.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that was great.
But then I had lost all my pictures from the first 4 months of the journey. A lot of memories that I wouldn't get back. But with the cash, I bought a camera. Just these compact cameras that we used to have in the 2000s.
Yeah, the small point and click ones.
Yeah. And then I had a memory card. I took a lot of pictures for the next 3 months. And when I came to South Africa, I was pretty much broke. And I had my tent and I was camping in a hostel in the garden. So then, since I was staying in the tent, I needed to charge my camera. So I left it in the reception, charging the camera. And when I woke up in the morning, I couldn't see my camera. It was gone.
No way.
And then I found out there was a class of like 30 French school kids that had checked out this morning, and someone must have taken it. So that was the last 3 months of pictures from that journey as well.
Wow. So all the memories are living inside you. You don't have them to sort of digitally, basically.
There was Facebook, so some pictures are shared, and I have friends who have taken pictures the whole journey, but my own ones are gone.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that can be quite heartbreaking. I remember back in 2009, we went to through Latin America and South America. We went to so many countries in one stretch, using this how do you say it, Spiegelreflex camera, and we went to Galapagos and we took so many amazing pictures, not just on Galapagos, but in Venezuela and Peru and Ecuador and Costa Rica and all the countries before that. and they were all on 2 memory cards, but mostly on one that was quite big. And when we went to Galapagos, we went to like an internet cafe, and we brought the camera there, and we forgot to bring it back.
Oh.
And then the internet cafe closed. We went back to the place where we were sleeping, and the next day we went super early before the place opened, and we like knocked on the door, and it was gone. All of those pictures were gone.
You don't care about the DSLR camera at that point.
Relate.
An expensive camera is not important. The importance is the pictures. In South America, they have an expression. They say giving papaya, dar papaya. And if you give papaya, you're giving someone an opportunity to take from you. So in that case, it sounded like you were giving them papaya. You left it there.
We left it there, yeah.
Yeah.
It was careless.
I learned not to be too attached to the pictures either, because that's somewhat a materialistic thing as well. I mean, it'd be great to have them, a photo of them somewhere I can look at them, but it's not what matters. It's the memories.
Absolutely. I even would say, maybe this is a bit controversial, but I would even say that sometimes when I've been on a trip, taken a lot of photos, and some time goes by, maybe 6 months, 12 months, and then I want to look at the photos. I look at the photos, and after having looked at them, I feel that I start associating the journey more with the photos than the memories. So they start to replace a little bit of the memories, or like my real memories are sort of not wiped out, but they're like dissolving a little bit and being replaced by some of these highlights that are on the memory cards. So I feel sometimes it's actually not conducive to my memory to look too much at the photos.
That's true. If you have a broad variety of photos as well, they can probably help you to refresh your memory and so. But yeah, to put too much emphasis into some photos, which might not represent the journey somehow. Exactly.
Because I guess a wonderful thing with photos is bringing out the atmosphere and the feeling.
Yeah.
And then you know, maybe the best thing is just putting them aside and then like going with the feeling and then closing your eyes and visualizing. But what often tends to happen, at least with me, is that I get really excited and I start like, looking a lot at all the photos and flipping back and forth. And then it starts to sort of take precedence of some of the memories.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just me.
No, definitely. I mean, it's also this whole, again, the variety of stories. Somehow when you take a picture, you want to capture exactly that, perfect moment. But then there's so much more to it. And those details of perhaps, someone that you met, etc., might be in the shadow of that moment with you and a sea lion, in Galapagos.
Yeah.
Instead of like thinking of all the other factors that contribute to that story somehow.
The smell and the feeling and the sort of the wind you felt in your face at that moment, or
no, so I can 100% relate for sure.
Let's also talk a little bit about the other book that you've written. You released it in 2023, Project Borderless. And in this book, you talk about visiting states that are not recognized by the rest of the world as their own countries.
Yeah.
And in this last book, you describe the challenges that this presents for both visitors and the people who live in the country, the population. Maybe you can talk a little bit about these sort of challenges.
In 2019, when I finished my quest of visiting every country in Seychelles in March, I was kind of sad that I would never go to a new country. This thing that I've been doing for 10 years, chasing, new countries to visit, was just over, I thought. But then when traveling and reading on later, there's just so many places that are not UN members. Some examples I can bring up is Taiwan, Kosovo, etc. They're not UN members. Last week I was in Tibet, and Tibet is represented by China in the UN. But the experience I got in Tibet last week, compared to traveling East Coast China, is black and white. It's just so different. You have this city life, commercial capitalist way of living in the East Coast of China, and then you have this very old traditional way of living in Tibet. The landscape is different, the food is different. So I just made it a project then to go to these kind of places, to search for for places that could have been countries that are where people think of themselves as countries somehow. There's movements going on, and I wanted to find out, is there similarities between them? What are the chances of these breaking free and just controlling themselves instead of being controlled of who is representing them in the US today? In the future, the situation of these exact places could have changed quite a lot.
So there's a window of opportunity to sort of visit and experience it.
Reading this book in 10 years and saying a place like Bougainville, which has had a referendum where 97% decided that they will be independent. It will be independent, just like South Sudan became independent. Documenting the time before it became a country, and then perhaps visiting again once it's a country.
I would imagine that quite a few of these maybe have their own language. Some of them might have their own flag.
A lot of them have been countries in the past as well. Tibet, for example, became occupied in 1949. And before then, it was completely self-ruled. And even to this date, they say that they have their own government living in exile in Dharamsala. The Dalai Lama is the leader of the Tibetan people. People of 6 million people, approximately the size of Norway population. Yeah. And they're scattered around the world. Someone living in exile because they cannot have their own way of life as they used before. That's just one story. A farmer in Australia who didn't want to pay taxes, so he made his own country. Hutt River Principality, where he was a prince.
Oh, really?
And he controlled an area the size of Belgium. So,
the size of Belgium?
Yeah, the farms there are gigantic.
Oh, wow.
So to go there, visit these places and find out what's the story, I thought that would be a good concept for a book. Why is Liechtenstein a country but not Greenland, for example?
Countries are fascinating because, in a sense, all the borders are determined by how many people believe that there's a border here. Because very often, I mean, there's maybe not a fence, there's not a wall or something like that. It's just like an imaginary border. And the same like currency. If enough people believe in the currency or believe that this word means this thing, then that's what it does. But if people stop believing in this country or this nation state, then they stop being. Yeah. And there's so many examples of that. And also looking back in history, so many different borders have shifted and moved over the years. It's a very fluent thing. A nation is a very fluent thing.
It definitely is. And the title of the book as well, Borderless. There are nations that don't have their own borders. In Iraq, for example, you have the Kurdish territories in the north, where they control themselves completely. They have their own culture, language, everything, but there's no border that you're crossing. So it is a concept made up in the minds of people, between people, shared values, that we say this is Kurdistan and this is Iraq. That people from there would not call themselves Iraqi, they would call themselves Kurdish.
Yeah.
So it could have been the same thing in northern Norway with our indigenous people, the Samis, for example, that they wanted to have their own country. Luckily, I think for both them and us, they haven't. But that's the case in a lot of places, that they have lived perhaps separated from the other people for a long time for the development of a language and culture and food and everything.
If the indigenous people of Norway were to have their own country, it would span, Norway and Sweden and Finland and parts of Russia as well, actually. Yeah. You've done a lot of solo travels, but you've also done a lot of group trips. What comes to mind as some of the most fun or memorable moments from traveling in each category?
Traveling alone is giving you an opportunity to have the flexibility that we talked about.
Yeah, for sure.
And I have to travel alone sometimes, but I also need these group trips. Because first of all, I don't spend much time in Norway living here. I just visit for a couple of days and then I get off to do some work on a ship or to go traveling again. And I don't have a network at home, but I have all these people I know everywhere. So instead of asking them to come and visit me in Norway when I'm in Norway those few days, I invite them to join my trips. Yeah. So I get to see a lot of my friends coming on different journeys. And here in Stavanger, we could go for a coffee or we can have a beer together. But the experiences that we get in these group trips is to see new places. And it just makes us bond even more, I think, than a cup of coffee or beer would do. One thing is like dynamic friendships, that you meet people and you connect for a shorter time and then you say goodbye. I like that too, but it's really nice to have people that you say, hey, I'll see you in another country. So when this trip in Tibet finished last week, a group trip that I put together, I know that I will see most of those people somewhere else in the world. I've really come to love that. Also, there's some places that you cannot visit as an independent traveler.
Oh, yeah. Could you speak to that?
There are some countries, for example. There is Syria, Bhutan, North Korea. Did I say Eritrea? Some countries that require you to have a guide and a group when you travel. So if you want to go there, you'd have to go as part of a group where you have a local agency who organize all your details and papers. And people can for sure just book their own trip to Syria, but do you really know that the people you're going with is reliable and the best alternative? So I think that once I've done a few trips there, I really have perfectioned my itinerary and the people we go with, etc. And that makes it worth it for people to just hop on a trip that I've done the research for, and I can vouch that this will be a good program. And it's really great also to see that the people who meet on these trips, they sometimes end up going by themselves somewhere else later. So it's really
liberating them, or
yeah, it just feels like
fueling the fire.
That I'm like a center point where people get to know each other through me, and that also brings joy. Seeing other people connecting who are similar in their nature and who love to travel. It's become very meaningful, and I think that places like Croatia or the places that people go where there's a lot of tourists, they don't deserve all these tourists somehow, because it just becomes like a transactional. They just want to make money off it.
That's true. That has a completely different feel to it.
Yeah, so the places where I organize trips is mostly where people don't go, pretty much. And it's so beautiful to see them having tourists and really caring about tourists, appreciating the groups that come. So it feels very meaningful, also in the sense that the people actually go to Syria, or could be Afghanistan, or right now I have one group in Yemen, for example, where I'm not part of it as well.
You organize the trip and they go by themselves, or you have other people that work for you that sort of...
Yeah. This year I was in Yemen and I had a group, and I was leading a tour, and I made a blueprint. So I had the hotels, I have every little detail that I write, and then people can book the same package that I did, following the same footsteps. So they're in Yemen now, enjoying themselves, and it's so beautiful to watch stories from there and just reliving the memories that I had as well. Organizing these trips, just having people with similar mindsets, and just say, okay, we got an idea. Should we do it? Okay, let's go. Yeah. So, for example, in Syria, when I was there last with the group, there was a rave going on in a castle. Cool. Should we do it? Hell yes. So we went on a rave in Syria, which was a crazy experience. And some of these trips, actually, how it started was that I would buy cars and I would drive them and sell them somewhere else. And on the way, I invited people to join. So, for example, I would get one friend to join and drive one car, and I would drive the other. I bought the tents, I bought the cooking gear, camping area, everything. And it was easy for people to just fly in and join for 2 weeks or 2 months, however long they wanted. And on those trips, it was really like being alone somehow as well. You have all this sea of opportunities, and we decide there and then what we should do. One thing is dinners, we can have a vote, etc. But a lot of times, people just trust me that this is a good idea. Let's do this. Let's go to that rave. They actually let go of themselves a lot to be more cohesive as a group.
Yeah.
So even though you'd actually prefer to stay in the hotel, you say, okay, I'll join to the rave, and then I can just take a taxi and go to the hotel when I don't want anymore. And others to stay out all night until we have breakfast in the morning and continue the journey.
I would imagine also that the people who either meet you or follow you on social media and get inspired, you would also sort of magnetically attract people who have a mindset in which they're adventurous, or they want to explore, or maybe want to push their boundaries a little bit. So that also selects for, I would imagine, people who are more willing to I would say, explore and do things that they maybe otherwise wouldn't. And they would probably also recognize you as someone who they can trust in that regard.
Yeah.
This is worthwhile, this is high quality, this makes sense, or this is worth the risk, or however you want to put it.
And a lot of times, like when they push themselves out of their like boundaries, those are the stuff that you remember. So
yeah, for sure.
Usually they're quite glad that they decided to hop on and do it. But we definitely do things impulsively as well. Although we have an itinerary what you're going to see, because the benefit of that is that you actually get to see a lot. You have set out what you're going to see, you become more effective instead of like roaming around. What should we do now?
Yeah, definitely more effective.
So the journey that we did in Southeast Asia, I say me and my girlfriend at the time, took us 4.5 months. But the exact same route pretty much. Through the travel agent work, I was selling tours for 1 month. It was something about discovering these things ourselves. Somehow we thought we discovered it ourselves, but it's actually like we ended up following the same route that the tours would do somehow. They call it the banana pancake trail in Southeast Asia. The place where you get your banana, or you can find banana pancakes where backpackers go. It was great in the way that it was exciting to find these ourselves. Okay, a riverboat trip in Laos, or spotting pink dolphins or whatever. But we could have also joined this tour where it said on the itinerary that this is what you're going to see.
Yeah.
So it's just two different ways of travel, and there's pros and cons of both.
Absolutely. And I really loved also what you touched on earlier in the conversation when you spoke about how travel or experiences can facilitate stronger bonds between people. And I definitely found that to be very true, and that resonates very strongly with me as well. As I've seen that very often if you meet someone for the first time, or maybe you don't know them that well, and you do an experience that perhaps none of you have done before, or maybe just one of you, then that bond becomes so much stronger because both of you are pushing your limits. This is new and exciting. It will be part of your memory bank instantly just because it's this experience. But we're also having this shared experience. We're doing it together. We're pushing our limits. We're sort of supporting each other in different ways. And it sort of solidifies and strengthens that bond so incredibly much. And very often it feels like you've known them for 10 years after going on a trip for 2 weeks because you had so many like first time experiences with them. And I found that it's magical, and it's sort of almost like a connection hack in a way. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, that's what I meant with these dynamic friendships. And sometimes you are, like you said, you meet someone and you have these experiences, and it becomes like they're almost closer than people you know your whole life. You trust them with sharing your experience because you know them. You see through the experiences how they behave, and like you get to know people very fast. And you're sharing the space and the food, etc. Sometimes as well, the people who you travel with, they can remember these stories better than you. So when I was in Tibet now, it's like, oh, I remember that time we were traveling around Algeria together, or in Socotra in Yemen, and they share these stories that I had forgotten. Because I think that when I travel as much as I do, some memories somehow get pushed out to make space for others. But for them, if it's like the 1 or 2 trips they do a year, these memories, they stick quite well.
Absolutely.
So for me, it's also very valuable to relive those memories by hearing the stories that I had not forgotten, but I just put them to the side somehow.
Yeah, it makes them come alive again, yeah.
And then you have things to talk about. So like in a group setting as well, around the bonfire or at the dinner, they're sharing these stories, to other people, and so as well. And that also brings joy, I must say.
We spoke about some fun and exciting memories. We spoke about a few, I would say, a few grim moments or moments where things went sideways.
Yeah.
And I think very often it feels like if you're patient and flexible, open-minded, and can stay calm, most situations, no matter how bad, will somehow resolve themselves.
Yeah.
And that seems to be some, at least for me, a learning, like a takeaway from traveling that you can sort of apply to your normal day life. That sort of, some of these things, like people can tell you, but unless you've experienced something like that, then you can internalize it and sort of really, I would say, integrate it in your normal life, daily life rather.
There's these 3 P's that I like to use as well, that are patience, as you touched upon. Patience is very important, and you need patience to travel. Actually, travel is a lot of waiting. You're sitting in buses for a long time, you're sitting at borders, you're waiting for things to come through like a visa. But also persistence is important. Like if you keep on doing something, if you're chasing something, if you say that you want this, it will come most times. And then there's politeness. Yeah. You need to have this. You can't just ask for something like, give it to me. It's really, you need to do it in a way which makes people want to give it to you. So these things has been very useful, especially for borders and visas and these things, because there's a lot of times where they don't want to give you a visa. And you need time and this open mindset, as you mentioned, with your patience and persistence to keep going, just as long as you do it in a nice way.
It would be interesting to share a few more of those stories when it goes sideways as well. Very often I feel that when it happens, of course, it's not very pleasant, but they sometimes end up being very fond memories.
Oh, absolutely.
Afterwards.
There's so many stories from these cars breaking down in, weirdest, most remote places. But then we just pitch a tent and we wait. And same with borders. I had to wait more than 24 hours at the border before they let me through. But then you pitch a tent, you cook some food, and you wait. We had even like tattoo kit with us. Oh, really? So we're making tattoos on each other, for example, on the way. Visa-wise, there's one visa that sticks out, which took me 2 years to get. It was the hardest one to get for me from all 193 countries.
Which one was that?
That was from a country called Equatorial Guinea. When people ask, where is that? I usually pull out my map here and show, okay, it's here in the armpit of West Africa, Yeah. There's this tiny country. They have a lot of oil and gas, but it's very poor. And people are very illiterate and don't have clean drinking water, etc. So it's very corrupt, obviously. And they don't want people to come and see that. They just make it very difficult for people to get visas. They don't need tourism, just like Angola and other countries. They just decided, okay, we're going to stick to our oil business, and then, tourists can wait.
Yeah.
So I went through 6 embassies trying to get this, most of them in Africa. And I remember one of the interviews I went to, they said they want a vaccine for cholera. And I told them, cholera, it's like, there's no vaccine against it. There's these sachets you can drink.
Yeah, the Goal ones.
Yeah, so you can drink that, but that's not a vaccine, right? No, you need to get the vaccine. So I was like, okay, shit, how do I do this? I can't go around it. I said I need it. So I took the batch from my malaria medicine, because this was right after Cameroon when I was sick with malaria. So this is a number of the treatment, just like the number of the vaccine. I put that in my vaccination card, signed off, okay, I gotten the cholera vaccine. So I come back to the embassy, and the guy looks at this, really studies it. Okay, so you have the vaccine for cholera. Well, then we want to have a letter from your government saying that you are a nice person.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so you mean a police certificate that my government shows that I haven't done anything wrong, that I haven't been to jail? So no, we want something from them saying that you're a nice person. And that's something I couldn't get. It's not like the king or the prime minister will write anything personal to me. But that's one way of doing business in some of these countries. You just get someone powerful to vouch for you, and then, you can do anything. But unfortunately, that's not how it works in Norway. Fortunately, actually. So I had to move on. And eventually, I managed to get the visa in the same place I went the first time, in London, because they had changed their policy. So a lot of countries now, they're opening up to tourism. Saudi Arabia was the same. They had their oil. They didn't need tourists. It was completely closed off. And now they're promoting it. They're investing into tourism.
Yeah, that has really changed. I read a few articles about that.
Yeah, it's really changing. And the world is changing. And mostly for the better. It becomes easier now to go to every country. There's forums, people chasing this quest. When I finished, it was less than 200 people that visited every country. Now there's around 400, but I think in 5 years there'll be 1,000 at least.
Yeah, so it's happening that rapidly.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's so many resources online now. You can search up Myanmar. If you look for information about Myanmar, you can find 5-6 travelers who are there now or who are just there, who have up-to-date information on visas, safety, logistics, everything. So that has made it a lot easier. And also now there's more who got the eyes open that you can actually visit every country. So I'm part of a group online now with like 15,000 members who are chasing the same goal.
And is that like a Facebook community, or how do you communicate?
Yeah, there's many of them. Forums, Facebook communities where you're sharing experiences. When they finished, there's been some people who come up with new lists of places like countries that are not countries or territories. So now there's most traveled people and there's Nomad Mania. And Nomad Mania also verifies that you've been to every country. You send them your passports, pictures of your passports, stamps and visas, and they kind of go through it and verify that you have been to every country.
What was it? Nomad?
Nomad Mania.
Nomad Mania.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they also have divided up the worlds in, UNESCO sites, national parks.
Yeah.
So there's so many lists now that you can go through. So I will never run out.
You will never run out. No.
So that's great. Some of these people, they are chartering boats and planes to go to islands, and it's a different kind of budget travel than mine. So they also sometimes invite the others. So there's basically some who have a lot of money, and they just charter a boat for a week and you go. So I've also been invited on a trip where they just paid for everything.
Oh, really? And where did you go then?
I went to a breakaway state in Azerbaijan called Artsakh, or now it's called Nagorno-Karabakh. They had support from the military, so I got to drive a tank myself, shoot with grenade launchers and everything with the military and staying in the military camps.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was a very special trip. So they managed to get, usually through payment, then their ways into places where few people have been before. There's this one guy, he founded the most traveled people website. His name is Charles Valet from the US. And he sold the company for, I think, something like $400 million or something like this. And that was in 2008. And since then, he's traveled up that money. So they do spend a lot of money on their travels just to get to rocks in the middle of the ocean where no one has been before, for example. I know him and I've traveled with him, for example. I think chartering boats is more useful than chartering planes because there's so many remote places without airports, islands by Antarctica, in the Pacific, all over. But it's not my goal to visit all of those. That would be too expensive. Tuvalu, the least visited country in the world.
Oh, really?
It's the same size as my island, pretty much. You can go up and down the country, 20 or 100 times in a week. And when I was there was only one flight per week. So I kind of understand why islands are prisons as well. You can't get anywhere. It's not my favorite way to travel. I like this one way without backtracking, just continuing to the next somehow overland. So I have a big map, a wooden map on my apartment with the lines in different colors, the ways I've traveled with bus and trains and boats.
So each mode of transportation is a different color?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So right now I want to connect all these dots. I've done these long journeys, for example, from Norway to China by train, and then back also only by train, except for one leg, through the Silk Road. So in a way, like I have overland traveled most of Asia, Eurasia, etc., and driven all the way down to South Africa. But I want to connect the dots, for example, from Norway to the Americas, sail across, to kind of have it as a one go, even though separate journeys.
Yeah, but
I
all
feel
together
this need to connect it, because traveling overland is just so different from flying somewhere. Flying is expensive, and you're skipping all the experience on the way. I think, you know how people say it's a journey, not the destination?
Yeah.
It becomes more and more true the more you travel.
And it's wonderful, for instance, to travel by train because you get to see all the landscape and everything.
It really is. A couple of days ago, we did a 3-day train journey from Chengdu to Lhasa in Tibet. and you're going up in passes of 5,000 meters, and the landscape is changing so much. You see people getting on and off the trains. People are changing, food is changing. So, like when you're doing the Trans-Siberian as well, you have to adjust the hour, 1 hour every day you wake up.
Oh, really?
Because there's so many different time zones. So it's exactly, you're traveling the same, distance to cover 1 hour every single day.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So for example, the first stretch from Moscow to Irkutsk was 5 days. That's more than 100 hours in a train. And when we came to Irkutsk, we didn't want to get off because you get into a way of, you get used to this. You can wake up and go to bed whenever, and there's always someone you can hang out with. You can go to the restaurant cart.
Into
so
this
really
rhythm,
nice,
yeah.
It is. And then you fall asleep to the rocking train.
Yeah, it's actually quite comfortable to sleep in a train because of that rocking all the time.
It is.
It is easier to fall asleep.
And you look out the window and you can spend hours looking. Much better than watching on TV, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So much of traveling has to do with nature, appreciating nature and landscapes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all these other things as well, like monuments and culture and all that, but there's so much natural beauty to see.
It is.
And being reminded of how beautiful nature just in and of itself can be.
Yeah.
I would love for you to speak a little bit to the significance of nature to you, and I would imagine that maybe that's changed over the years.
If you'd look at my map, you'd see that I've covered a lot of distance overland. I've seen this landscape changing. So when I travel, when I see a landscape, it usually reminds me of somewhere else as well. So I always have this element of comparison, which perhaps is not the healthiest somehow. If you're traveling Southeast Asia and you start with seeing Angkor Wat, then everything will compare to it somehow. Landscape definitely is a big part of travels, and you can really find peace, especially when you go camping on a mountaintop by a lake or a river. It really feels freeing, and it's like it belongs to you somehow. Yeah. If you stay in a hotel, cramped into a small room, and in the middle of the city, it's not at all the same feeling.
Feels more transactional, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really part of being free is being in the nature somehow. And there's some places where there's not a lot of people. Tibet would be one of them, but say Australia, where you've been studying, it's a lot of land for not a lot of people. So they have cities, but between the cities, it's a lot of emptiness. So just having a 4x4 and driving onto the beaches and just setting up your camp completely alone. If you want to be naked, you can be naked. Whatever you want to do, no one cares. That is freeing. There's an island in Yemen, actually. It's called Socotra. And this island is 120 kilometers by 40 kilometers in size. And I would dare to say that the diversity of landscape on this island is almost comparable to Australia. So there's deserts, there's red rocks and, canyons and beautiful turquoise waters, white sandy dunes, camels, and this unique type of trees called the dragon blood trees. And when you cut them, they're actually bleeding red color. That's how they got the name. So I've been doing 4 trips there, organizing, where we just go with tents and we camp in the nature. Waking up to sunrises, watching the stars, seeing the sunsets, cooking on bonfires. It's really one of the most beautiful places I've been, really.
Well, I need to take a note of that. Yeah. It also reminds me of, I think it was back in 2008, around Easter, we went to Fraser Island in Australia.
Yeah.
And that also felt like Australia in like scaled down size.
Yeah.
There's so much different landscape. You go by 4x4. There's the beaches, there's the desert, you have the tropical forest, you have cliffs, you have dolphins, you have shipwrecks, you have all these different things, the dingoes. It was like a miniature Australia, so to speak. And I was just flabbergasted by how many things and different sceneries and experiences you can have in such a small island. And I just got that association when you spoke.
Yeah, so there's this kind of beauty with the beaches, for example, the turquoise waters, and you'd find that, for example, Maldives is incredible, one of the most beautiful places in that way. But it's somewhat a little bit dead, especially if you go to resort islands. It's just tourists, made for tourists. So there's beauty in so many different ways. And then it depends what you're searching for your travels. Is it a hiking trip where you want to be climbing mountains, or you want to be lying by the beach? So when people are asking, a lot of times they ask, what's your favorite country and favorite experience, etc. It's like very hard to choose because it's just so depends on what you're searching for and your time of life and
the category and everything.
Everything, yeah.
For me, one of the countries that surprised me the most, to put it into a context, was, I think, Bolivia.
Bolivia. Yeah.
Bolivia was so spectacular in terms of nature, which I wasn't fully prepared for. And I just thought it was amazing. Just spectacular, just so beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, Peru also is incredible and so, but when you go to, for example, Machu Picchu, as soon as you arrive there, they know how to overcharge it. They're used to tourists. But when you come to Bolivia, they're not. Like it's
and the crowds are much smaller.
Yeah, it's just one of the places where, for some reason, fewer people choose to go to, compared to Ecuador and Peru and Colombia now, and and there's beauty in that too. Just feeling that you're discovering things for yourself.
That's a beautiful feeling, isn't it?
And the whole thing about, they don't have new people coming every day. That's when it becomes this transactional. So they have the opposite of that, where they're actually interested in you and take time, etc. So I also really love Bolivia.
I seem to often come back to that, maybe at night, just before I go to bed or something. I sort of imagine some of the landscapes that I saw, just the mountains and the sky, and sometimes there was maybe like a lake, like a green emerald lake or something. And I just sort of, some of those pictures like flash before my eyes, and I just, wow, it was truly beautiful.
Yeah. The biggest salt desert in the world, Uyuni.
Yeah, Salado
Uyuni.
Uyuni.
Salt hotels and just drive for days. But it's so much more than just a picture of white and salt. Like the colors of the ground, they change so much. And at different altitudes, there's geysers and flamingos and So that's perhaps one of the examples where you'd have the picture of Uyuni, just a salt desert. But then there was just so much more.
So much more to offer, Yeah, that was basically it, I think. I've seen some pictures from La Paz and a few other of the cities, and then I was very familiar with Salado Uyuni before going there, and then there was like this buffet of things to do and see and experience, and it was
really.
just, wow, overwhelming. What would you say sort of drives you today? You've seen quite a lot. You've had so many experiences. You've written two books about it. What sort of what fuels your fire today, and what motivates you on a day-to-day basis, would you say?
I have these lists and the map that I can draw, etc. But it's not quantifying. It's really become more of like finding smaller moments somehow that I appreciate. So this quality. Give you a place where you may camp, or a moment that you have with someone. So really to focus more on that. But in order to do so, you just need to be on the move, and then those moments will come. I'm not really necessarily planning as much like ahead. I'm just sometimes drifting just to drift. So I can divide up, if I go for 1 month, that I have 2 weeks where it's more or less planned, and then 2 weeks where I'm open to travel around. And both are great in their own ways, as we discussed. I think the driving factor is really how I've had an understanding of how short my life actually is. I've had some, actually, like I could have died some of these experiences that I've talked about as well, and others. And realizing that this might happen at any time. You don't know, you can get sick, or all things can happen. That really drives me to just see as much. So I have a big degree of FOMO. I know there's still so many things I want to see, and I just want to get out there and see it. And it's okay, I can be disappointed or love it, but it's an experience, and I would know. So, and the only way I can know is just to go there. I can read up all I want on Tibet online, but it doesn't compare to going there and getting this multitude of experiences or like realizations that you can't get from limited written sources, for example.
So you have to go there, have to be there, have to feel the sensation of being there, and take in all the sensory input. I think it's fascinating also to hear where you find inspiration these days. You talked a little bit about these communities. Are those sources of inspiration? Or I would imagine listening to stories of people you meet on the road. But how do you think about inspiration, or how do you get excited about a new place to go to?
Actually, I try to keep off, for example, consuming where other people paint a picture for me. So I want to get, like, for example, looking at the map. I can walk by a map and stop and look for an hour. Just like some people maybe stop and look at their mirror, you know? And just looking at the map, looking at the mountains, looking at the roads, how everything's connected, can make me drawn to one area where I don't know much. For example, I was in Caucasus, where I've traveled a lot before, but I didn't cross the border with Russia. So on the other side of the border, when you go to Chechnya, Dagestan, Ingushetia, South Ossetia, they are very different. So more so looking at this map that I had drawn up and seeing where's the black spots. So I haven't been to the four corners of the world, for example. I haven't been to the South Island of New Zealand. I haven't been to Patagonia. I haven't been to Alaska. I haven't been to Kamchatka in northeast Russia. So these are blanks, and I know that they are some of the most beautiful places in the world. So I'll always find spots that I haven't done all, of course. So going to those places is really more what is guiding me. And if you go to really remote places on the countryside, that's where you find the real culture. That's where you find the traditions. Because in the cities, everyone is becoming more and more alike, consuming the same McDonald's and smartphones, and
that's true.
Travel was more of getting lost. And then suddenly I realized that by reading online an article about the first Norwegian who did it in 2013, I looked at the map thinking that, okay, I've been to the hardest places in the world somehow, then that means that I can do it as well. So, like, that kind of got me on the track of visiting our country. But also the looking at the map and saying, okay, I've been there, but I haven't been there, wondering how it's different. And so that has really been from the start more my guidance. Okay, I'm curious about Central Asia first, and then India, of course, and Central America. So it's more just going to places I haven't been out of curiosity than having, like, the ideas put in my mind somehow. So just basically having a lot of time and freedom to be able to book a one-way ticket and then figuring things out.
Yeah, while you're on the road, so to speak. Except
for some places where, like through my job as a travel agent, I like Pacific Islands, for example, it's just so expensive to travel to them. So you need to really perfection the route so you don't have to fly back and spend lots of extra money on flights, etc. But otherwise, like the road trips driving from Europe to South Africa, it's just day by day.
Yeah.
I wanted to reach the goal of coming down there, but we didn't know the route that we take. That would depend on a million factors like visas and roads and weather and what was possible, safety.
How do you plan the solo trips and as opposed to the group trips? And I would imagine that the approach would be slightly different. When you do the group trips, how do you start out? Do you start out with a lot of people maybe requesting to go to a certain place, or maybe you've decided it would be wonderful to go to this place, or I would love to show all these people that I know this particular place that I love so much? Like, there's so many different ways to approach it. Like, how do you think about it?
It can be either or of these ways. For example, Tibet last week, I hadn't been there myself. I wanted to go for over 10 years, but for 10 years, Norwegians weren't allowed to go.
How so?
It's political because we gave the Nobel Peace Prize to a guy called Liu Xiaobo, who was working for freedom of press, and we have hosted the Dalai Lama yearly in Trondheim for students, having presentations, etc. And somewhat been parting with the Tibetan cause, which of course Beijing and China doesn't like, so they have restricted it for Norwegians. But that trip was more like filling in the blanks. I knew that I wanted to go there, and I've talked to people, hearing experiences and plotting together, like, because when you plan the group trips, you need to know the details, etc. So that's one part. But then the case of Caucasus, for example, I just knew the general area, and I had to find out where do I need the permits, how can I get those, etc. But the actual details of the experiences is something I did along the way. So I had my own car. I was sleeping in the car, and then I was following my maps, looking at the sites around, and even following signs saying take off right for this mountain or this site. So that was more day by day. Same on my last trip to China now. A month and a half ago, I also went to Japan and just rented a car in Hokkaido. And then just driving, you can spot signs of hot springs, and okay, you make camp there, sleep in the car. So 7 out of 8 nights I just slept in the car, and then waking up and going to a hot spring in the morning. Saw a lot of deer around, did a lot of hikes, but I knew almost nothing about those things before I went there.
And that was a solo trip, the one to Japan? Yeah.
So I was also quite unlucky because I had rented this car and I was driving in the night. And then something happened that I didn't really think could happen to me, where I was just in my own thoughts. And then I blinked, that's how it felt like to me. And then I woke up in the forest, crashed into a tree. So I fell asleep behind the wheel while being in my own thoughts. And that was really scary because you don't see it happening. You can feel that you're tired, but you don't feel the moment where you're falling asleep and then waking up. It was like a blink.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was really scary. So that was an expensive experience. I had to pay $1,700 for the damages on the car. But it's also a very important lesson, I think, to not repeat the same mistake, because it could be a lot worse, both financially and with my health.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I've been in some traffic accidents, one really bad in Iran where I broke my femur leg. So it was the biggest bone, the strongest bone in your body, and I'm still recovering.
Yeah, how many years ago was that? 3 years?
Almost 3, yeah.
How did that happen? There was traffic.
It was a road trip with a friend where she kind of was scared when we had a truck coming towards us. So she pulled out to the far right of the road, a bit of outside of the road. When she pulled back in, she pulled too far. So she pulled in the wrong lane where the truck was coming towards us. So that was a front-to-front collision.
Oh, wow.
The car was completely wrecked, and my leg was up here by my shoulder. Yeah. So that was 4 surgeries and a lot of time in hospitals, both in Iran and in Norway.
These things can happen. I mean, no matter how safe you are, suddenly it can just happen. So, I mean, it's
that's
coincidences true. And
But they can be life-changing. I mean, I have a life before that happened and after that happened. I'm waking up every morning thinking how my leg is and going bed feeling, how is it feeling? So you need to start working out.
Tough recovery process. It sounds, quite dramatic. I mean, the femur is, as you say, I mean...
It was, huge. Because also when I was sent to hospital, my other friends were not there, and I didn't know if they were alive or not. And to be in a hospital, one thing is the pain, but the anxiety that comes from it, I had no clue of. I never felt anxiety in that way before that moment.
Yeah, are your friends alive? Are they hurt?
Yeah, they're good now, but one spent more than a month in a coma, and it could have been, another outcome.
Those things definitely shape you. I mean, both in a positive way, but also it can be shattering or, devastating. Let's shift gears a little bit. You've experienced a lot. You've seen most of the world. You've met a lot of people, and you've heard a lot of stories. I would be curious to know how you define success. What does that word mean to you, and has that definition changed over time for you?
Yeah.
Or maybe there's a moment in time that changed your perspective completely on the meaning of that word.
I actually would compare the word success with the word meaning somehow, define a meaning, because what is success? Is it like how you measured among people around you, or is it how you measure yourself? And doing what's meaningful to you, in my opinion, that is the definition of success somehow. So it's not the amount you have on your bank account or, the status or anything. It is achieving what you want to achieve for the reasons that you have for yourself.
Has that changed for you throughout the years? And if so, in what way?
Yes, I've gone more from this quantitative way of traveling to this qualitative, where I really start appreciating more the smaller moments. I think that's a maturity process that most people go through in life. That you have all these things you want to explore, great, and you hopping around, but to just like slow down and see the smaller things. That perhaps comes a little bit with age and sometimes experience.
When you were on the quest of visiting all the 195 countries, and when you completed that, did you feel a sense of like, now I can relax, or now I can sort of take it easy, or how was that?
That's how I imagined I would feel.
Yeah.
But it really was an anticlimax. I didn't have my future set out, not really knowing exactly what I'm going to do. And it was so much easier just following a track than being in that moment and just having all the opportunity, everything open somehow. But I pushed that forward, so I have all the things I want to do, but I'm looking forward to not doing those things as well. I look forward to actually retiring from travel at some point as well, and travel less. Because there's a lot of things I missed out on. There's relationships and there's career or whatever people are doing mostly. I've just been so focused, so on track for these travels all the time. So it will be nice to kind of, I like writing, do some more writing. It makes you process experiences and digest them somehow. So that is also very meaningful, to put words into experiences.
Would you imagine yourself writing fiction, or would it be non-fiction, or would it be like based on your or poetry? I mean, which direction do you lean towards?
I would kind of share more about, for example, life philosophy. So the whole aspect of minimalism, for example, it can help a lot of people, I think. So it doesn't necessarily have to be about travel.
Yeah, I would imagine there's quite a lot of life lessons that you've picked up during your years that could be very interesting for others to hear in a different context, maybe than what you've done so far.
And being a traveler is being an observer. And coming to China 15 years ago and coming to China now, or India or anywhere, you'll see a lot of changes. So maybe I'll pick up some work where those experiences can be useful to project the future somehow a little bit, in which direction things are going.
Yeah, sort of future studies.
If it's like in a diplomatic level, or it's definitely useful experiences.
Have you ever thought about what important truth do very few people agree with you on?
I find it challenging sometimes to talk about places where I understand that the truth is much bigger than what people already know somehow. So it can be challenging, just like we discussed, the experience in Syria or Afghanistan, etc. It's just that people want to say, no, this is how it is. And, they heard so many stories. But all the stories they heard, they are somehow off with the same angle somehow. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a curse to sometimes talk with people and knowing that they take a stance on it and they would not be open to hearing about anything else that's not confirming the things that they've already heard.
In the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life, do you think?
I don't have a lot of friends around in the place I am. I have more started to believe that anyone can be a friend if you just try and are willing to take those steps. So like the views on friendships, I think that I've realized that I don't have that much need for security. So to have the same people around all the time, compared to like when I see them once in a while on trips, etc., that's changed like the whole social dynamics, because I grew up with friends and I still have those friends, but we are, living very different lives and therefore growing a lot apart. But I just realized that that's okay too.
Yeah.
To let go of some things, to open yourself up to other things.
Let go of some traditional expectations.
Yeah.
I also subscribe to this saying that I know you've talked about in the past, which is a stranger is just a friend that you haven't got to know yet.
Yes,
And that has been something that I felt for many, many years. So it really resonated strongly when I heard you mentioned this in some context as well. And I think that speaks a little bit to what you're saying now, that anyone you meet can basically be your friend.
And when you travel as well, and when you are alone, then you need the help of people around you, so you have to ask, etc. And by doing so, you're opening yourself up. And this, like, becoming friends, it can be in a moment, like very quickly, where you realize both that you can trust each other, and it's like, hey, you want to come stay at my place? Like Nora did. It's like, yeah.
By being vulnerable, you sort of invite someone to trust you more, because I'm showing something that I usually don't show to other people, or here you see me in a situation where I'm not so confident.
Yeah.
And that I'm giving you like a hand of trust, and if you lean into that and trust me as well, and it can go both ways, then you can sort of the path to becoming friends are shorter.
Yeah.
When you ask someone for help, you put yourself in a vulnerable position, which then disarms the other part very often, and creates trust, and then suddenly you can become friends, or you can have some connection there. Because I feel at least in this society that we live in, a lot of people are afraid to ask for help. They think it's like a sign of weakness, and you see people will Google or do all kinds of research rather than just asking someone, because they don't want to appear weak or vulnerable.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is a pity, because then you're sort of hiding yourself from that potential connection.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most important skill that you've developed so far in life, and why?
So patience is just a very large part of the travel. It can be patience in so many ways, not just the waiting part, but just kind of realizing that perhaps you don't understand. So giving yourself time to kind of see things differently instead of just jumping on conclusions.
If we circle back to sort of your main focus area of traveling, is there some advice you could give to a novice traveler, or someone starting out, maybe traveling outside of Europe for the first time, or planning their first major journey? How would you advise someone like that?
Somehow not to think as much.
Yeah.
It's different if you're going to, a war zone, but if you're just going to travel in Southeast Asia, etc., you can figure out things on the way. If you have your passport and a credit card, things are very affordable. So you can find solutions. Okay, you didn't pack right, but that can be fixed. You didn't plan where to find a place to stay. Well, that can be fixed. Just ask for help, ask for advice, and it will be given.
That's sound advice. People often tend to overcomplicate things.
Yeah, but if you have a strong passport and you have a card with some money on it, then you're already good. You can get out of any situation. You can always go back home if it doesn't work out for you.
Yeah, true.
But people tend to wait too long and to somehow over-prepare, that they want everything to be right, and it's often that the exactly right time doesn't come.
Yeah.
You have to take the steps yourself.
True.
That means like asking for leave from work or quitting.
Analysis paralysis seems to be a very real thing.
Yeah.
So what's next for you as an avid traveler and author? Do you have some concrete plans for the next, let's say, 3-6 months? 1 year?
Yes, the next 3 months I have a lot of adventures planned. I haven't been to every continent. There's one continent I haven't been to. It's Antarctica. So now over Christmas I'll be spending on a boat in Antarctica, going to Falkland Islands. And there's Easter Island I haven't been to. So just scratching off those surfaces off the map where I haven't been before. And at some point I think I can say that okay, I've seen pretty much what I want to see, and lean back thinking that. But time we'll see. I thought I would do the same in 2019 when I finished every country. If that limit or is that thought is just pushed further ahead until I don't live anymore, or that I actually find a time where I say, okay, not that I've seen it all, but I'm happy with what I've seen.
I think at least for me, I always wanted to go to Antarctica. I find it mesmerizing. Yeah. I read a few books about different expeditions, so I'd love to go there. And I remember when I was a kid, I went to Sølvberg in Stavanger city center, and there was a person standing there selling all kinds of stones, and one of the stones was shaped like the heads of the statues at the Easter Island.
The novice.
Yeah. And I think I was maybe 6 years old or something like that, and I was really, really fascinated by it. So I bought this, or rather my parents bought it for me, maybe 50 kroners or something, and I had it next to my bed. And I haven't been to the Easter Island yet, but ever since that moment, I always wanted to go.
A seed has been planted.
A seed has been planted, for sure. Yeah. So that sounds really, really exciting for me personally as well. It's
also a very remote place. They say it's one of the most remote places in the world. But I think of Antarctica that way as well. And there's like something really thrilling about that. You go there to this continent of ice. And when you sit there, you have just between you and the rest of the world, there's just a ship. So that's like being in outer space, landing on a foreign planet. If that boat breaks down, if that spaceship breaks down, that's where you're going to stay. So that's really a thought I've been having, that it's just so remote and isolated, and you can't drive there. It's just by this multi-day boat ride that you get there.
And I'm also fascinated by these mountains that you have there at Dronning Mauds Land. And
so the tallest mountains in Norway are in Antarctica.
Yeah,
True.
Which is really it's a fascinating place, and a place that's also very often not shown on maps, so you tend to not think about it that much.
True.
Yeah, I think let's zoom out a bit and focus on the big picture. So if you could get one short message out, or image out to the world, what would it say or show, and why?
Stop fighting. I mean, I want people to realize that we're all, the same, regardless of our religion or beliefs. And I mean, for people to understand that and for war to stop, maybe it sounds naive and everything, but it's really like when you go to countries and you realize the destruction of war, all you wish for is for this not to happen again. Any message that can make people understand that.
The world definitely needs more love, compassion, understanding, and putting themselves in the shoes of another person.
Yeah. That has to do with understanding and get to knowing your neighbor and the people who are different to you.
Do you ever think about the end of your life and what will be after you? Do you think about legacy or what you would leave behind?
I'm an existentialist, and when I'm away, and I understand that whoever was the biggest, most important person 50 years ago, most people don't know about him now even. You can try to achieve everything you want in life, but when it ends somehow. And there's something freeing about that as well. That you're not doing something for someone else, you should just do it for yourself and enjoy your life as long as you can.
So at the very end, I want to hand you yet another seemingly impossible large question. When it all boils down to the core essence, what is the meaning of life as you see it?
An existentialist, he thinks that you make meaning to your own life. So that is so individual, based on what everyone believes in, but get as much out of your own life as possible without limiting or harming others. So I will keep collecting experiences and keep tasting new foods and meeting new people, trying to get new understanding of things for as long as I can. And that doesn't necessarily have to do with travel. You can get there through so many ways. You can host travelers in your own country. You can learn from so many ways, like especially with these digital opportunities that we have today. And to be hungry for knowledge and understanding.
Beautiful. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
How can people reach out to you online, and where can they find you?
Well, online I go by Vagabjørn. I have this name that I crafted between Vagabond and Bjørn, my name.
Yeah.
And Bjørn means bear in Norwegian, of course. So I have a website. I have my books. They've been translated in some languages. I have Arabic, French, and English, and Norwegian. Let me know if someone has a question. I'm always answering messages from people. So I always enjoy getting in touch with people.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
If you appreciated that, then click here for more content like this. Go on. Click it. And don't forget to subscribe. Be well.